that would rather be avoided. That's what he told Cybercast News Service. Michael said the overall idea apparently originated with Soviet scientists in the 1970s who were trying to change the climate over northern Russia. So I'm just going to try to pick a couple more things here as far as geoengineering goes, because, like I said, you have chemtrails, but then, chemtrails does cover, different parts, and the other part was the cloud seeding. And since we just talked about the Russians, actually I'm going to go to that article that I meant to get to before, which was the Moscow mayor without snow. This is when they actually stopped it from snowing. So this is from October 2009. I believe it was Time magazine. Pigs still can't fly, but this winter, the mayor of Moscow promises to keep it from snowing. For just a few $1 million, the mayor's office will hire the Russian Air Force to spray a fine chemical mist over the clouds before they reach the capital, forcing them to dump their snow outside the city. And so, yeah, Delta, that's what you were talking about, where they spraying a fine chemical mist over the clouds before they reach the capital.
Right.
It says controlling the weather in Moscow is nothing new, he says, ahead of the two main holidays celebrated in the city each year, Victory Day in May Day and City Day in September. The often cash-strapped Air Force is paid to make sure that it doesn't, rain on the parades. And he says, you know how every year on City Day and Victory Day we create the off, asked a group of farmers outside Moscow in September, according to Russian media reports. It says here that the city's Department of Housing and Public Works described how it would work. The Air Force would use cement powder, dry ice, or silver iodide to spray the clouds from November 15th to March 15th, and only to prevent, quote, very big and serious snow from falling on the city. And that was the Tisbin, who was the head of the department, said that. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's crazy. It's, I got so many articles here, but I wanted to be able to try to get your opinion on some of this, or what you got on it, what you think there, Delta, because...
you had me thinking that would be a great question to ask the listeners, right? Take the areas that are heavily sprayed versus, the USA versus other countries, and see how many people are sick with, flu, cold, respiratory illnesses, United States versus them areas that are sprayed and not sprayed.
Well, I don't know that offhand. If there's somebody out there that's listening that does know that, you're more than welcome to call in or email in and help us out on this. Anything that as far as having personal experience with chemtrails, if you've actually seen this gelatus, they call it goop or gel or powder. There's been reports of yellow powder falling on the ground, people scraping this, like I said, gel off their windshield wiper. There's been people that said that after they sprayed, like out in the Ukraine, when they had that reported black lung right after the big bad swine flu hit the U.S., the Ukraine and Central Europe was getting hit by black lung, and reportedly before that happened, a bunch of people cited chemtrailing. I don't know if you heard that, Delta, but it was last year, towards the fall. There were a bunch of reports for coming out of Ukraine and that where they said they were spraying before that big illness hit them, that plague.
Well, there's so much news to keep up with. I think we were busy researching the hoax of the swine flu and didn't catch that one. I think I watched a video on chemtrails making people sick in other countries, and they stopped spraying and people got better, but I don't remember the video.
Yeah, I mean, it was even in Mexico too, with the beginning of what I consider kind of. It's not me even consider. I'm going off different, because I'm telling you, I just looked through so many articles, so I'm not pulling this stuff out of thin air. There was articles written where scientists were quoted as saying that the H1N1 virus looked as though it was made in a lab. Everything pointed towards it, the way it was, part bird, part pig or swine flu, and then the avian flu, and then the worst type human flu. But the point I'm making is that when that possible or alleged man-made flu was released and it first started hitting down in Mexico in the spring, early spring in February of 2009, there was also reports in Mexico that they were chemtrailing as well, that they were just doing massive chemtrailing, just massive spraying going on.
Yeah, exactly. You know, what we should do is ask Richard to come on the show the next time we talk about, illnesses, metals, anything like that. Richard would be the great guest to ask.
For that. So, I mean, this is a start, and now, I mean, that's 2 right there. I don't know if that's a pattern or not, but, I mean, we'll have to keep our eyes out this spring and in the fall.
Well, let me ask you, have you noticed this pollen-like yellow substance on your windows yet?
I've never had the gel stuff on my window, although I do know someone that has told me of their experience out in Arizona, where there's usually not a lot of rain or clouds for the most part. And they told me about a story about how they had the gel just gooped up all on their windshields, is all over the plants. And my personal experience as far as stuff particulate falling was just like a kind of a yellowish powder that kind of fell all over the cars in a parking lot.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. That caught my attention too. Well, it's wintertime, and that's certainly not pollen. Anyway, folks, we'll be right back after this. You're listening to The Cutting Edge.
Those pesky census takers seem to want more and more personal information every time they fan out into our neighborhoods. The Census Department wants us to think that we have some duty to cooperate with them, sort of like jury duty or something. I wanted to find out for all of our beloved viewers exactly what you are and are not required to tell a government agent who knocks on your door. I called the Census Bureau Media Relations Department and I asked for a telephone interview. They said they would schedule the interview, and they asked for my questions in advance.
Send me those questions?
They looked at my questions and refused to answer them, and they reneged on the telephone interview. Maybe the questions were too hard. I'll read you those questions in a moment, but first you may be surprised to know some of the questions that they will be asking you sometime soon. They'll be asking you about your disabilities, how much income you receive, where you get your income from, your housing costs, how many cars you own, how much you pay for insurance, if you receive food stamps, how much you pay for utilities. They'll be asking you things that you would not tell a stranger. In my view, if they have a clipboard and a certificate from the Census Bureau, they are still strangers. You may know that the Constitution allows the government to count us once every 10 years. For some reason, the Census Bureau has recently started counting us and collecting information about us every year, all year around. I'm not sure why, because the Constitution does not authorize them to do that. Remember that to interact with you in any way, government must have constitutional authorization for that. But we as citizens have simply been lax for the last couple of 100 years at demanding proof of authority before handing over our information, our money, our power, and our liberty to government. So I think since we've fallen behind in limiting the encroachment of government on our wealth and privacy, maybe the census would be a good place to start to let the government know that we know that they are not authorized to demand our cooperation in the contrived schemes they come up with for information gathering. If they claim they do have the authority to gather your private information, show them a copy of the Constitution and ask them to show you the part that authorizes them to demand private information from you. Videotape their responses. Let's see if we can make a few thousand YouTube videos of census takers stammering and lying. Here are some of my questions that the Census Bureau Media Relations Department chose not to answer. The Constitution authorizes government to count people, but it does not authorize the taking of private information or even the names of individuals. From where does the Census Bureau derive authority to demand our private information? No answer. Is there any limit to the amount and the type of private information that the Census Bureau may demand and collect? No answer. Under what constitution